It's so weird how I've been talking to so many people from different time zones,
Yeah.
and I'm like, wait, what's going on? And so like I have to do basic math, but my basic math like feels like non-existent. So
I graduated high school on ninth grade math because I kept failing. And I don't exactly know how it worked legally, but they let me pass on ninth grade math. So I know exactly how you feel.
I feel
Just
like
terrible.
ninth grade math is like, I don't know, maybe like what you do end up using for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even know really my multiplication tables. I mean, it's that bad. I think technically I have a form of a dyscalculia, I think it's called, or something like that, which is like dyslexia, but with numbers. It's
Yeah.
it's a big problem in my life. I can't do
Yeah.
even simple equations.
I don't know. When I was much younger, of course, I could multiply like three digits, at this,
Yeah.
so three-digit numbers, sometimes maybe up to four-digit numbers. And now I'm just like, what's eight times eight? Like,
I wouldn't know.
oh.
Put a gun to my head. I have no clue. No clue. This is how we usually start. So, can you state your name, something about you, could be anything, hobby, job, anything. And then, do you sleep with your socks on or off?
Okay, so I am Roy Guzman. Something about me, I live in Minneapolis, and the socks that really depends. I mean, I feel like up here the weather has dropped so much, but there are days where I'm just like, even the heat is so it's like it's too much. So I do take off my socks in the middle of the night.
Hmm.
So I guess I'm that person who does start off with their socks and then yeah, things
Okay.
just
Do you
just
do you sleep hot usually?
I try to sleep kind of cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got the AC blasting all the time. I know it's irresponsible to the environment, but I got no choice. I sweat my ass off all night, no matter what.
Yes. Michael, where do you live?
I live in Queens, New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you could be as vague as you want right now. Where are you?
I am in the lobby of the building I live in.
Okay. And you said that's in Minneapolis, right?
That is Minneapolis, yeah.
Okay. You like it there? Minneapolis?
I love it here. I've been here for about 6 years. Yeah, since 2014.
Mhm.
And I just, yeah, there's been so many people that I love here, the communities. I say communities because there are so many things going on at the same time. Um, and I love the people. I love the programs I've been in here. So I love the food, even though I know that some people like are like, wait, what? Like, is it really that kind of space where you can get a lot of different foods and or different styles of foods? And yeah, like we have a lot of Ethiopians here. We have Somalis. We have Salvadorans, Mexicans. I mean, you name it.
That's awesome. I'm looking to potentially move in the somewhat near future, so you might have a
Yes.
neighbor. We'll see.
Yes.
All right, here's a hypothetical for you. I was scrolling through your Instagram a little bit, and I saw there was this post. This person, Elizabeth Tannen, stopped by, and he said to bring me some sweets because she loves baking and I love eating. So here's my
Yes.
hypothetical for you. You tell me if you take this deal. No sweets of any kind for 10 years. That includes sweet drinks, okay? But two times a year, you can rewind something you said as if it never happened.
I could do what you said as if it never happened.
You can
I could try.
rewind something you said as if it never happened. So if you said something stupid or like whatever, you could be like, all right, I didn't say that. And two times a year you could do that. But no sweets for
Okay.
10 years if you accept that.
Okay. Okay. Uh. Ooh. Hmm. Hmm. That's a tough one. That's a really tough one because I love sweets. And 10 years is a lot.
Yeah.
And there are things that I would absolutely take back. Hmm. I don't know that I can do that. I
Okay.
don't know what I can
Okay. All right. Hold on one second. Deal's off. Yeah. Yeah. Just cancel it. Okay. All right.
do.
Have you ever yelled at someone else's child?
Ooh, no, I do
Okay.
not do that. I feel like, I mean, my mom is kind of intense because she let me tell you a little bit about my mom. So,
Please.
I'm an only child.
Me too.
She is very strict. And so, every time we go to friends' houses or whatnot, she would tell me, like, you're going to sit down. You cannot ask for anything, not even water. You're going to wait for them to offer that stuff to you. And then what would happen is that if she was in a place where there was like a child misbehaving, my mom, she always cares about her teeth. Like, she's a broke ass woman who somehow manages to find money to go and, like, get cleanups and whatnot. So she would carry around like dental floss and toothpicks. And so if a child misbehaved, like, she would like get her purse and she would like get close to the child.
Oh my
and
God.
Out of nowhere, she would just like poke the child with one of the toothpicks, and then the child would be like, oh my God, like, what happened? Then, like, or they would start crying, and then the parents would be like, so what happened? And like no one would know. And then of course, like, I would see my mom very like just quiet, very gentle, like, oh, I'm so sorry, how can I help? And yeah.
Wait, so she would pretend that she would not fess up.
No, absolutely not. She was just so stealthful about it.
Wow.
Yep.
So essentially these were little poking weapons rather than something to pick something from your teeth.
Yeah, absolutely. But ever since I saw that kind of like like intense behavior from my mom, I realized that I'm like, other people's kids are not my kids.
Right.
Like, I do not want to scream at a kid, because kids will always tell their parents, or almost always tell their parents. I'm like, nope.
That is hilarious.
Have you?
Yeah, I mean, not in any. I only did it to my. Let me think. The only thing that pops in my head is about 2 or 3 years ago, we had this couple with a kid that lived nearby, and their window was in like the alleyway where my window is, our bedroom window, and their kid every night would either be laughing until like 3 a.m. or crying until 3 a.m. I don't know what the deal was. And one day I was so exhausted and I didn't want to scream at the kid, because it's not something I typically do. But at the same time, I was like, I can't go marching upstairs at 3 a.m. That feels weird too. So I opened the window. My window was closed and I could still hear it. So I opened the window and I tried to disguise my voice. I'm very impulsive as a person and I'm not the smartest guy, which I'm sure you're going to find out as we talk more. So I tried to disguise my voice as an old man, and I didn't know what to say. So I ended up just yelling into the alleyway at like 3 a.m. No, I just screamed no as an old man, and it totally worked. And the kid was quiet, and they moved soon after that. So it worked, but it was like just screaming no as an old man at 3 a.m. was an interesting experience.
You were probably, I don't know, you probably confirmed some theories they already had about the building.
Right. Yeah, sure. And I was like, I don't want to just be like, shut up. So I was like, I'll be an old man, a little sympathetic, and just say no for some reason. I don't know.
That's great.
No.
No.
Okay, so when it comes to poetry, I've always had a somewhat complicated relationship with it. I have trouble understanding a lot of it if it's not plain spoken poetry. Like,
we all have a complicated relationship to poetry,
right? Like I could recognize beautiful writing in poetry, but it doesn't always come with like that deep understanding about what the poem's about. Kind of like if I look at a painting, I'm like, I love this painting, but I don't exactly know why.
Yeah.
And I was reading an interview with you in the Rumpus where you said, to me, a word is containing colors, it's containing different shapes, it's containing different tones, different kinds of attitudes. So my question is, how important is it to you that people understand what your poems are actually about? And how important is it to you that you understand what other people's poems are actually about?
Ooh, that's a good question. I feel like understanding is very different than appreciating. And sometimes I feel like what I'm more concerned with, I'm more invested in people appreciating like the language rather than like necessarily understanding it, because, you know, so many poems are open to interpretation. Even when I read my own work, I'm just like, wait, okay, what was I trying to do here? Actually, this feels like, you know, the many roads not taken type of thing.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's more about appreciating. Like, I would rather watch someone eat a word, you know, and salivate over a word and like put, you know, hot sauce over a word than I would someone like, you know, trying to decode what the word is trying to do. Because at the end of the day, it's like, it's language, and language is so slippery. So I feel like that's what I would want people to do. Appreciate it more. Just sit down, letting that, you know, that music sort of wash over you, rather than like trying to figure it out. Like, you know, I think that's one of the dangers in how people even learn or are taught poetry.
Yep.
That it has that poetry is this labyrinth that you need to, you know, once you know, you make it to the center, it's like you'll understand everything, right? You'll understand all the secrets of the universe, and it's like, no, that's not how this works. Yeah, that's how I want that. I want people to be able to lean on a poem, to be able to repeat words in a poem and not necessarily know why they're doing that. The same way that we do with, you know, music in general.
Yep. Yeah. Even like, yeah, people will sing lyrics out loud that they don't know what they're even saying. But with poetry, there's like this intimidation factor.
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens to me with like most of like, especially early REM music. Like, I'm just like, you know, like, and there's something about the lulling sound, like, that I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling this.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you typically, and I'm sure it varies, but just in general, do you spend a lot of time editing your poems, or do they just kind of come out?
I do revise a shit ton.
Okay.
I revise so much. There are poems that, especially when I was thinking about this book that I just put out, there are poems that I think took me about 8 years to revise. They went through so many different iterations. And then the problem is that you spend so much time trying to revise a poem, you put it away, and then you come back to it like 2, 3 years later, and you're just like, I'm a whole different person.
Yeah.
So it's hard to even, accept your quote unquote younger voice. It happens to me a lot. I'm also someone that, unfortunately, maybe because of teaching, I feel like this is something that comes up in my book, which is a joke that one of my former students, who's since become a very good friend, she's always reminded me of that. You know, you're teaching, right? There will be some chickies, right, that will like, you know, as you're like sort of directing them from point A to point B, they'll just like veer their own way. They're just go, you know, and they might die or something might happen to them. They'll create their own communities. And I'm someone that constantly is concerned about making sure that everyone is understanding, that everyone's following along. And over the years, I've had to accept that, like, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
When you I don't know why I'm just popped in my head, but in college there was a professor who would give us poems to read, and he said, try to misinterpret what this poem is actually saying. And I just love that. I don't know why that just popped in my head, but
yeah, no, that's beautiful. And it's even like, I feel like I'm thinking of a poet like Harriet Mullen, who is all, you know, thinking about language poets, right? And language poets are very much invested in yeah, again, the possibilities of language without necessarily thinking about consciousness, without necessarily thinking about like, oh, you know, I have to create a poem. It's more like, no, this is more about the process, the experience. This is what I'm like learning about myself while I'm creating this sort of, you know, hodgepodge of a poem. So yeah, I'm all about that. Like, misinterpreting, I think it's great. And
yeah.
I'm gonna cite someone that like I dislike very much, Harold Bloom.
Okay.
But Harold Bloom used to say this, that I guess the man's still alive, but in some of the work that I've read, that some misreadings can be incredibly productive.
Yeah.
And so I think about that a lot, that it's not necessarily about getting it. It's really about sometimes like, I started on this journey and look, I went this other way and it still like worked for me.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes art is like more about the person viewing it than the actual person who wrote it. I guess that's kind of related to what we're saying. When you know a poem is completed, is it a feeling, or do you have some kind of method to be like, okay, I am done now?
Ooh, it's more a feeling.
Okay.
I would say that it's more a feeling. I think, pre-COVID days, there's so much, trial and, that would go into that, at least for me. I don't feel as comfortable debuting a lot of work during this pandemic, but I feel like reading work out loud, especially in front of a crowd, like hearing people respond to it, whether it be like just their breathing or whether it be like a laughter, like just like giggles or whatnot, to me, that's really important because again, like poetry is an oral experience. And so if I can bring that language into this space and allow people to kind of appreciate it and get some feedback in that, I feel like that's how I know something feels kind of complete.
Right. Yeah. I almost get the feeling like it's very similar to doing stand-up comedy, where you have to read the audience in order to edit.
Absolutely. And my mentor, Ray Gonzalez, the poet Ray Gonzalez, like he is all about like, I think specifically thinking about he loves prose poetry, and actually I do too. But he says that prose poetry, one of the reasons why it's this quote unquote poetry that is functioning as like a paragraph and functioning almost like a short story is because in many ways, like jokes are like that too. Like the setup of a joke is like that, where you're being told something and then, there's an element of surprise in that. There's an element of like, like veering the story in a different direction. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, now that we're on talking about, like, I guess, showing your art and stand-up comedy, and also just like reading your works in progress and sort of like editing as you go. You've done a lot of talks, lectures, readings. Can you give me something either like awkward, embarrassing, or super aggressive that happened during one?
Ooh. Embarrassing. Something that comes up a lot, which is it's hilarious actually. And I both appreciate it, I'm mystified by it, and then sometimes I'm like, kind of like fuck off. Is when people mispronounce the title of my book. So it's
Wait, hold on, don't say it. Oh, darn it. Okay. I was gonna
sorry. So it's Catrachos. But some people, I think that I've seen this, they think the C and H, because I guess in English, we're so used to thinking about that more like in Italian terms, probably. So they say Catrachos, which creates a whole different kind of experience.
I was going to say Catrachos. So kind of in the area.
Oh, you're there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're totally there. But I find that that's very, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm someone that, like, if I'm about to host an event or a reading or whatnot, I absolutely want to make sure that I, pronounce people's names correctly, that I know their pronouns. But there are people who are just like, nope, I know how this book is pronounced and I will pronounce it. And then it's like, boom. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to correct them at all. I'm just going to go with this, Catrachos / sounds like an update to a Tetris game.
Yeah. I mean, I'm bad with that stuff. Like, I'm very impulsive. So for me, it's not, I don't go into it with confidence. It's more just like, oh, I didn't even freaking think to look at this. Like, I'm so dumb. But luckily I'm not in the situation too often where I need to know how to pronounce something.
There are some great people, especially I'm thinking about ratings and hosts. There are people who are very good at messing up and like just um like they have this graceful way of bringing it back.
Yeah.
And then there are some people that are just like, oh my gosh, it's like digging a hole deeper and deeper.
Right.
And I'm like, oh shit.
I almost feel like it's like you should know how to pronounce things, but let's put that aside. It's almost like if you, let's say you didn't learn how to, or you thought you did, but you were wrong. It's almost the way you recognize that it's like an attitude. Like if you say something incorrect and it's like, you're like, yeah, it's this. Meanwhile, if you go, I'm not really sure, but I think it's this, it feels totally different.
Yeah, it's a different experience. It also feels like it can be a humbling experience for not just for the host, but for everybody who was like, you know what, I actually did not know how to pronounce this. And thank you so much for almost like taking me through the steps of like being, gracefully figuring out how to pronounce someone's, name or the title of this. Because even when you can correct someone, like even if you're given that opportunity, there are people who are just going to keep mispronouncing it. It's just
and some of those are good-natured, good-hearted people. It's just a weird thing that they just can't get down.
Yeah. It's like, no, we probably should have spent about 2 hours rolling our R's, like making sure that we had enough, doing our arpeggios, something.
I just want to talk like really briefly about one of your poems, Restored Mural for Orlando, which is about the 2016 Pulse nightclub shooting. Horrible event. It was, I don't have it in front of me, it was like, what, 50 people were killed? And then 50 somewhat how many were injured? Do you remember?
I think 53 or so were injured.
So you kind of like work through your feelings about the whole event during the poem. And you sort of like come to terms with a world that's mildly like at best has like a mild discomfort towards the gay community. Is that fair to say? And at worst, violent hatred towards the gay community.
Yep.
Am I on track so far? Okay.
Yep.
So it ends with a pair of lovers walks in, another eagerly awaits the last call of the evening. It would seem the record wants to keep spinning while we wipe their blood from the floor. I'm not reading this in a beautiful way, but for them, we learn to touch again. For them, we walk home and we are safe. So it feels to me like a somewhat hopeful ending, unless I'm totally off.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Do you have hope that we're moving towards a more peaceful world, or at least a more peaceful United States? Or does that does that feeling that this poem ends on, is it very focused on just, hey, look, I have to move forward because there are people like me who need support? Or do you think are you a hopeful person? Is kind of what I'm asking.
That's a really good question. There was there's a book fair here in the Twin Cities, the Twin Cities, I think, Book Festival. It's put together by Rain Taxi. And I attended one of the sessions, and the session was by YA writers. And YA literature is, again, it's a whole other like universe, and it's so interesting. So there's so much beauty and potential in that space. And these three writers were talking about like, how do they write about like gruesome stuff in these books where traditionally writers have been told that, YA should be like, a cleaner space, it should be like, oh, look at how this boy learned how to like, I don't know, cut a tree or something, rather than like, look how this person, like this child survived like sexual assault or things like that. And one of the things that came up in that conversation, which is very much in line with how I see, how I think about your question, is what happens when you end up writing an ending to a story, to a poem, to a book, right? That in many ways ends up being more hopeful than what actually could have happened to this, child, or what what often happens to people in these situations.
Mm.
And I was thinking about that because I feel like hope isn't necessarily a naive, it's not naive idealism. Hope for me, I think about it as a project. I think about it as, and project, and of course I'm thinking about this idea of like what happens when we project this sort of energy, right, of hope towards something. um, and when I wrote that poem, I had to be very intentional about the fact that even where there is death, there's already the possibility of how do we survive these things, right? And I say this because as as people who have had to navigate these like highly violent spaces, and I was thinking about like Matthew Shepard. I was thinking about other kids who have been murdered in Central America specifically, and then thinking about Black trans women in the United States. And um, one of the things that I was thinking is like, for me, hope is a thing that is very much at the core of the project of survival. And if we were to give up hope, then in many ways I would say that we have allowed the state, allowed the nation to basically dictate for us what our future should be.
Mm.
And so that is something that I have to be very conscious of, that hope can also be a form of resistance, right? That hope can
Yeah.
be a form of challenging the narrative. Um, and so when I was writing that poem, for me, I had to think about, I had to reminisce on the times that where I went to clubs and felt um, like, I don't know, I felt like I was giving up something of my own safety. I was risking something of my own safety. But then I had to remember the times when I did leave the club okay, and I
Right.
left the club with friends or with a lover or with whatever, and things turned out okay. I think it's very important to demonstrate that to queer and trans kids, that it's like not everything is death, right? That you do have the promise of another day. And yeah, I think that the question that you had asked about hope versus hope in a personal way, hope in a communal way, and also hope in a sort of thinking about a nation, I am more cynical when it comes to like thinking about hope in terms of the nation, or the nation state, because I think that the nation state is, the way I see it is, the nation state is a failure. The nation state has been a failure. It's shown that it's a failure since its inception. So do I have hope in the United States? Absolutely not. Do I have hope in the people that like live in this land, that try to negotiate all of these different challenges in this kind of nation state? Yes, absolutely. So I have hope in the people. In terms of the structures, I do not have hope in them.
I almost get the feeling like hope is, there's like a responsibility in hope. Like you need, especially for someone putting art into the world there, and specifically someone like you, who you're like, you need to portray things in such a way that if someone reads it and they're maybe going through tough times, they're not going to be like, oh, it's useless. It's useless to try. You need to uplift even with the darkness involved as well.
Absolutely. And for me, hope is work. And the reason why I say that is, I have to remember too that poetry doesn't just exist on the page, right? The poetry is also the relationships we have with one another. It's also like what I say to somebody else. And so for me, that's also very important, that I can write this beautiful poem and be the most like awful person, out there. Yeah, I can give you the best, book of sonnets about hope. But that doesn't mean shit. If I am not actively putting that kind of energy into everything I do, then it feels like I'm just pontificating on hope.
Right.
It feels like I'm just like um, I'm doing just half the work at that point.
Yeah, hope is, I mean, we could talk for hours about the concept of
Yeah.
hope. Because people, it's like us saying like, oh, all hope is false hope and all this. And I can go on and on, but I really like the idea of not only hope for yourself, but a responsibility, having hope for as a responsibility to others. That's a really cool concept.
It's
Also,
an investment. It's an
yeah,
investment in other people too. Like I genuinely hope for you this, right? That
right.
and it isn't just this like, oh, this kumbaya like thought. It's
Mm,
more like, um, tell me, now that I have that if my hope aligns with what you want in life, like tell me how I can help you make that happen.
yeah, yeah, and there's definitely like it's not the same as this term like toxic positivity, which I see a lot of. We're talking about
Exactly.
totally different things. We're not saying hope
Very
for the
good.
just to sound nice. We're like
This is not
real,
like, eat, pray, hope.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
or, a
Oh,
martini that's called hope. It's more like this is hope is how do we like reimagine the world? Like
right.
that's how I see it.
And there's this line in that poem where you talk about pistols and rifles and how pulled apart they can look like the arms of a lover. I just no question about it. I just like that a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I think about like even the ugliest experiences that I've ever experienced that um if I deconstruct them, if I when I was given the opportunity to deconstruct them or to pull them apart in some way, I realized that there was something else in there too, that there could be
Mm,
beauty, that there could be, hope.
yeah.
Exactly.
So love can I mean I don't exactly I don't know how to articulate this properly, but just roll with it. So a lot of times like love can turn to hate very easily. Like it
Yeah.
could just switch. Do you think it can just as easily be the opposite where hate can turn to love? Or do you think it's harder for that to happen?
Ooh. Mm. I feel like if 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 we see hope as a project, I think that hate can also be seen as a project as well.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is we hate for me, like hope, there are many different tiers, there are many different like forms of hate. Um and I feel like there are some forms of hate that feel more ingrained, rather than of the moment.
mm,
Um, so I think it really depends on what it is that you are hating.
right.
I think it depends on like how you were taught to hate or how did you learn to hate.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm. Like, is it even your hate or is this passed down hate? Yeah.
exactly. Did you inherit this sort of vendetta,
Mm,
or did you? Yeah, like what exactly are we talking about here? Like,
yeah.
is this like some hormonal reaction to something? Like, is this some kind of, like you said, and I often see this with moments of hate that it seems like hate is, um, it's a good moment of puppetry almost, where it feels like you or the person you're just like the mouthpiece for something else.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
All right. So look, by the time this episode comes out, it's going to be a few weeks from now, and I am going to be blown up. I mean, tons of you. So listen, all you parents out there, you can pass down hate to your kids, but you can also pass down love to your kids. Forget about the hate part. Choose the love part. You're giving them this love that maybe at first will be your love working through them, but will start to develop as their own love.
Hmm.
That make any sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
love is the most natural thing ever. And love is how, I think about the idea of a species, right? And how we've gotten to where we are in terms of like the ideas that we've developed, the relationships that we have, sort of honed. And to me, it's all a side effect of love.
Mm,
Hate, if it had been hate, we would have been dead a
yeah,
while
for
ago.
sure. All right. Well, look, now that we got all this unimportant stuff out of the way, let me ask you this. You know the adage, use it or lose it? What's a skill?
No.
Okay. Well, people say like use it or lose it, like use the skill or lose it, or use
Gotcha.
whatever. So, what's a skill or ability that you've lost because you haven't used it in a while? If you could think of one.
Ooh. A skill that I've lost. I haven't necessarily lost it. I think it definitely needs um, some more molding these
Some
days.
more
It's
love?
definitely some more love. Yeah, it's dancing. Um, I need to dance. I feel like I need to dance, and it sucks that we can't do that in all these common spaces. And
Right.
but hopefully we can go back to that space soon.
Okay, we just covered love and hope again in that one thing. You hope to get it back, and it's a love of yours. Okay, so all
Yes.
right, I'm gonna read you two article titles and then ask you a question somewhat related to them. This gets a little weird, but all right. Alien-like photo shows snake eel dangling out of heron's stomach in midair. So basically, and there's a picture of this. It's literally the bird flying, and the snake is eating its way out of the heron's stomach, and it's hanging from the stomach in the air as the bird's flying. Have you ever felt intimately linked to a nemesis, for lack of a better word, in your life? Like you couldn't escape each other?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I just spoke about the nation state.
Mm,
Being, quote unquote, a citizen of any, of this kind of project does feel like a love hate relationship. There are days when you just wake up and you're like, I believe in democracy. And there
right,
are days when you're just like, I just need a drink. Like,
right.
this is too much.
So what you're saying is depending on where you're at in life, you're either the heron or the eel coming out of its stomach. But no matter what, you're both in a bad situation, and it goes back and forth on who has the advantage, I guess.
I'm a Gemini, so it'll always be like I'm the two court jesters. I'm the two jokers in the deck. The uh, I'm the scorpion that can very well, like, I can kill myself unintentionally.
Right. All right. Here's another article. Clerk's mistake earns Missouri woman $100,000 lottery jackpot. So, can you tell me a time in your life when a mistake turned out really well for you?
Oh, Jesus! A mistake.
And if you can't think of anything,
Hmm. No, there's a lot of like interesting mistakes that have happened in my life. Um, there was one mistake that I made, which was like joining online dating sites.
mhm.
It's something that I did not do at all for years until I moved to Minnesota. And yeah, there were some mistakes on that. And then, I hit the jackpot with my current partner. So,
Oh, that's awesome. All right, that's a
yes.
nice little story. I like that. Um, let's talk dogs for a second. You post photos of what I'm assuming is your dog. Is Stitches the name?
Stitch, yeah.
Okay, okay. Do you think that dogs or pets in general make life better for most people? Like, should more people, if they're able to
Yes.
own a pet, is kind of what
Oh
I'm
my
asking.
goodness, yes. I have been a cat person for so many years. There was
Mm,
a point in my life where my parents and we owned 9 cats. It was pretty intense.
mm,
Um, and I haven't had a dog since I was like, geez, like maybe about 9 or 10.
mhm.
And then my current partner, he came with a dog, and her name is Sasha. She's a min pin that is about 10 years old, and we we moved in together and soon realized that she needed a play, a friend.
Yeah.
uh, the problem is we got a dog that is much bigger than she is, and he drives her like mad all the time. I mean, she like rules the house, but he's like about probably 2.5, 3 years old.
Right. Aw. Very
So
cute.
he's still a baby, so he's constantly vying for everybody's attention. And there are times when he just runs to her because he like wants to play with her, and she's just like, "Oh my gosh, this feels like a tsunami! Like save me!" Um, but yeah, animals have made my life so much more interesting, and I feel like they're so good to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. My cat passed away a few years ago, and not to be over dramatic, but emotionally not financially, first of all, not there, but more importantly, emotionally not ready for that again.
Yeah.
I that was pretty brutal because it was the first like animal I ever was like mine that I didn't just live with, but I was like, this is my cat, and I take things to heart too much, and it freaking was brutal.
I will say though, from experience, that probably not waiting forever to you're never going to replace that animal is the
Yep.
thing, right? So bringing in a newer experience with a newer animal is always just it's a great experience.
Listen, stop talking sense to me, all right? Let me just follow. Uh, um, I saw. I only have a few more questions, but I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Of course.
You're a Sailor Moon fan. I saw a picture of you with a Sailor Moon shirt on. I used to get up early before school every day and watch that show.
Hmm.
What's a cartoon from your childhood, and maybe it's Sailor Moon, that you still love today?
I love Arthur so much.
Okay.
Arthur ends up there's a poem about Arthur in my book. But what's interesting about this question is last night and today, I have been on this sort of mission to do research on Care Bears. I love Care Bears so much, and I grew up with two of them. But to know the history of a show like that, and to know like like why does something like this exist, and why how do we develop new toys, and how do we develop like um toys that show children like an element of care, like yeah. So I've been doing research on that. Maybe I'll have a series of poems after
I
Care Bears.
I love that. I love that. Please
Yes,
keep me posted on that because that's awesome.
of course.
Care Bears are this really, I don't know. There's something really cool. They're so simple, but I love how they each have their own little I don't even know what to call it. Logo. Like, uh,
Yeah.
I just love that. I love anything where you can pick a character that's part of a group but has that unique little quality. I'm a sucker for all that stuff. So I'm
Yeah.
a big fan of that. All right, so we're closing in on the end of 2020. Could you give me one very impactful book and one very impactful movie that you've seen? It doesn't necessarily have to be your favorite, but something that like cut to your heart this year.
That came out this year.
It actually didn't have to come out this year, just that you've experienced this year.
That I've experienced this year. God, there are so many. Um, I think I would say that Marcelo Hernandez Castillo's Children of the Land. Have you heard of this book?
I've never read it, but I have heard of it.
Yeah, it's a memoir of his of growing up undocumented, and having crossed the U.S. Mexico border, and it deals with deportation. But Marcelo is just an incredible poet too, and so you have this very lyric, very rich voice that takes you through a lot of pain, a lot of grief. There's issues related to like alcoholism, related to um, identity, bisexuality, like forming a family. There's a lot of good stuff in that book that I'm actually about to teach it this coming week.
Oh, awesome.
And so I just thought about that. In terms of a movie, you said a movie this year that has been.
And if you can't think of one, it's totally fine.
I can always think of things. That's the sadness. Like, but a movie. There's been so many good movies that have come out.
Well, I'll give my two picks while you're thinking.
Yeah.
One would definitely. Have you seen Honeyland, the documentary?
No.
Phenomenal. It's so good. So it's about this woman who is part of this community that basically moved away, and some of them were like beekeepers, and they would sell honey. It wasn't like from what I understood, they don't really go over this in the documentary. I just did very little research afterwards, but like some of them specialized in like selling honey. So she is like one of the only people left in this community with her aging and sick mother, and she's trying to like survive basically there. I'm doing a terrible job at this.
This sounds amazing, actually.
And it's gorgeously shot and very minimal. And there's so much to pull from it. And you as a teacher, I'd be really interested to hear what you pull from this, because there's, in my opinion, there's ways to even compare it. I don't want to say too much to like corporations taking over smaller businesses, even though it doesn't really overtly, it's not about that, but it's related. And that's my ramble about Honeyland. If you do watch it, contact me, because I will discuss it in a more articulate way than I'm just flying off the handle right now. But my book would be Oscar Martinez, The Beast. Have you read that?
No, The Beast.
Very, very, very good. And
when did it come out?
Look, 2010, I think. Yeah, I'm gonna say 2010.
Could you put the cover like?
Yeah.
Ooh, no, I've not seen this.
This book is amazing. I mean, I was on multiple levels, even if you have no real interest in hearing the struggles people go through to get to United States. Let's pretend you're someone who just like, I don't give a fuck about any of that. This book is still worth reading because it's incredibly written, and it feels weird to say because these are real people it's talking about, but just it's very entertaining and in a particular way. Like, I am riveted by what's happening in this.
So it's a memoir.
Well, basically, he is a journalist. I believe he's a journalist who follows people on their way to the United States from all different areas in Latin America and everything like that. It's real, and The Beast is, as most people know, like the train.
La Bestia.
And it's just their stories, and it's heartbreaking, and it's super entertaining, and it's like thrilling. It's a lot at once. I talk a lot about this book, and
I love that. A lot of the research that I do, my academic research, is more along the lines of that book. So I should definitely check it out. There's a book called now, you know what? I'm going to look this up right now because I don't want to misidentify his first name, but it is, oh, Jesus. It's Enrique's Journey.
Okay.
So Enrique's Journey came out in 2006, and it's also it's an amazing, amazing story. Sonia Nazario is, she follows a 17-year-old boy from Honduras who travels to the U.S. In search of his mom. And it's a gripping story. It's a powerful story. And I feel like it's definitely in conversation with this book because she, I don't know if Oscar also goes on the actual train to talk to people. But she also goes on it, and it's so dangerous. There's a point where I think that she almost falls off the train.
These people are running on top of it.
Yeah.
Snow. It's like, oh my.
Yeah. No, it's so dangerous. But I was thinking a lot about this question of a movie, and I'm gonna say that I'm actually going to talk about a TV show. Is it HBO or Hulu? It's probably HBO. Have you watched Lovecraft Country?
No, but I've heard like from multiple people to watch it.
It's so good.
It's so books,
good.
Right?
Yeah, it's based on a book, but I think that there's probably going to be more than one season. I'm hoping that there's going to be more than one season, but essentially, all the main characters most of the main characters are Black. They're living in the South during 1940s, 50s, 60s, and they're obviously facing like Jim Crow racism, but then they're also dealing with like all kinds of like creatures and like this bizarre world, basically an extension of Lovecraft.
Yeah.
It's so good. The story is gripping.
Racist, not Lovecraft.
Yeah, who was also racist, and the story also contends with things like that, like you know, what kind of evil is worse? You know, who's a worse monster? The one that has like, you know, all these eyes, or the one that, you know, is blatantly racist, you know, ready to kill you. So I thought that it's an amazing series.
I like that combination, because it is this thing that a lot of people, especially nowadays, are grappling with, which is like, I love this art, but this person maybe not so much. And when is it okay to appreciate the art and even like talk about it? It's like, oh, I love this. Do you have to then acknowledge, but I don't like the person who made it? Is it something that you have to say? Can you get away with not saying it? Should you not even read or experience the art?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. He's definitely one of those people. And there's plenty in our own time that are like that too. Like, I freaking love what you made, but I don't really like you at all.
Yeah. Or just, you know, you were highly influenced by their work for many years. And then now it's like, it almost feels like you have to, I don't know, like psych yourself out of it, or just take these interests that you had, or that this art or this artist sort of allowed you to develop, and then like channel that into other writers, you know, and other kinds of writings. There are so many people I feel like that about.
Yeah, right. Okay, I think we got 3 more here, and then I'll let you go. I'll let you go from my grasp. Right now, you're the eel. You're the eel trying to let go.
Oh, seriously.
Trying to get free.
I love eels.
When you look at yourself in the mirror, okay, this is generally not like mood based, just in general, are you basically okay with what you see physically?
Yeah, I'm okay. It took a long time to be okay, but I think it's because, and I've been teaching about his work recently. W.B. Du Bois, right? Like the idea of like double consciousness, and the idea that, you know, he specifically is talking about how Black people are essentially always seeing themselves through the eyes of, you know, the other. And I think that this is something very much like that's been a part of me, you know, whether it be like, it's not just about whiteness, but it's also been about like cultural shame, national shame, queer shame. So
yeah, and you can even like extend that further. This is only somewhat related, so I'm not trying to compare these things, just to make that very clear. Someone who has like me, who I have skin issues, so I'll have breakouts. So the way people see others with acne who are adults, you start to see yourself in that way too. Like, I can't stop looking at how gross I look. People are like, oh, why don't you just wash your face? Like the ignorance. Also, as a male who is on the very, very low end of the spectrum in terms of height, I'm looked at it a certain way. And I've realized that over time, that if there's a man next to me who is my height, I distance myself from that person.
Interesting.
And it's just like this inherent, like, I don't want to be near you type of thing. It's not horrible. I realized that about last year, that I was doing that. Like, then I consciously was like doing it. But that for years, I was like, I didn't even realize I was doing that.
Yeah, but I mean, it all comes down to, you know, how are we being conditioned to hate ourselves, and to be like our worst critics. And it's so interesting, because I've actually, one of the things that I will say to you is that I've really appreciated you being very, very open about that, and just like very, like, I wouldn't say very public, because I don't even know what that means for you, but but the fact that I am also, I feel like I'm a part of this journey with you, you know, and the same way that I'm a part of this journey with so many other people who are dealing with all kinds of other things.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, I find it very interesting, being on Facebook, you know, and it's like and by the way, you're not the only person talking about, like, you know, how do you navigate skin conditions, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the next person's talking about how they're navigating cancer. The next person is how they're navigating COVID. The next person's how, you know, and like hair loss. There's just all of these things that we navigate, but it's where we have been conditioned to not write about them and not to you know, and not share them because they're supposed to be sources of, whoops, sorry about that.
Okay.
Sources of shame.
Right. It's interesting how we treat each other with that stuff. Like certain conditions, or I can't think of the right words, but like conditions, or just like, you know, ethnicities or skin colors or anything like that, that's considered other to, I don't know, the mass public, I guess, how each thing is treated differently. So you might look at someone who is, let's say, a short male, and like people have said things to me like, as I'm walking through a bar, look out, short guy coming through. I'm like, how do you feel so comfortable just saying that? It's like, is it because you're not threatened by me? And what is this? It's so strange.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that you're also sort of hinting at is, why is it that we have become so used to growing up in a society that is making all these incredibly charged judgments about people just based on like first, you know, impressions, like physical impressions, right? Which have absolutely nothing to do with like the package, you know, of this whole person. And I see that a lot, you know, and I think that some of the stuff that you're talking about, it's like exactly being, you know, a person of color going into a room, boom, you know, it's almost like people need to put like a little, like, you know, like a clippy on you, tell you like, okay, like you're this, so I'm gonna make sure that my Google Map pin is always on you at all times, just in case I need to, like, I don't know, use you as an example for a joke, or for you know, showing the world how racist I'm not. Like,
same thing, like if you're wearing a turban or a hijab or like anything like that. And I think it's the problem. This is just maybe totally off, but it almost feels like the problem isn't that our brains are putting people in boxes, because I think that happens to everybody and it's so automatic. It's about after that initial thought, how you then treat that person. So it's like having the thought, okay, like, don't be so hard on yourself. It's gonna happen. If you see someone, I think I've given this example in an earlier thing, like you see someone with very bad burns on their face, you might do a double take because your brain's just like, whoa, I don't see that all the time. But after that initial reaction, now it's on you how you treat them and behave.
Exactly. It's like for people, you know, when people say, "Oh, I don't see color," almost as a way of saying, you know, I'm not racist, and I'm just like, actually, you're supposed to see color. Like this, yeah, like that's we are humans, you know, and I think about this, like back when I was living in Chicago, I did some. I was in my undergrad. I was sort of like a teacher's aide, teacher's assistant in this one school, and it was amazing because it was a third grade class, or class of third graders, and these kids would notice everything, like, why is your lip this way? Like, why is it this way? But they would ask these questions rather than like, because of this, therefore I'm going to treat you this way. You know, because you're behaving this way, therefore I'm going to do this. It's more like this sense of like inquisitiveness. And you know, I feel like whenever what you just shared now, like whenever I hear people say these kinds of things, it's like I feel sad for them, because I think your imagination, you just like compress your imagination to these little like categories, rather than like being fascinated with like what you see. You know, if not like, you know, you may not be interested in like being Michael's friend, but just like being fascinated by the
Which, by
fact
the
that
way,
you're
everyone should
sharing.
be interested in being my friend.
But like just the fact that you should be fascinated by sharing this space with these other people, like the fact that that dissipates is so sad.
In a way, it almost ties back a little bit to what we were saying earlier about like honesty and being authentic, to how if you mispronounce something, just flat out say, I'm sorry, I wasn't
Exactly.
sure. Like, it's how you behave in the world. It's not exactly the thoughts that pop in your head that matter as much, maybe.
It's a symptom, it's an extension of heteropatriarchy, right? And what I mean by that is when you're a straight, male, often a straight white male, you have been taught that you can say something and that you can walk away from that. It's you can detonate something and then just as easily walk away without ever thinking about the repercussions of what you just did. And it's, yeah, I think for the rest of us who do not, navigate the world like that, we have to be always like steps ahead. How are we going, if I say this, how is this person going to not just like hear that, but then how are they going to think about me? And then like, how is that going to affect our relationship or our interactions in the future? Yeah,
We should all, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, I was going to say that we're all like in this entanglement.
Right. I think a very, very, like, let's throw these big ideas away and just say like this very basic concept I feel like will help so many people is respect your neighbor, whoever that may be. Like,
Sure.
just show more respect to people, and I think we would go in a better direction. But
well, it's what's been happening, especially these last 4 years, that we have had to experience this. Obviously, this is something that is much older than that in this country, which is like you listen to someone speak in a different language, and suddenly, because you don't understand it, now it seems like you take that as an invitation to other them, right? To discriminate against them, to tell them, oh, we're in America, or oh, we're this, when in fact it's like even the way you speak English is very different than the way I speak English. And then like that's the whole point of this country. It's like people should speak the language differently.
Yeah. Yep. And another thing that, oh my God, bothers me so much is if someone speaks with an accent and then people will be like, yeah, they can't even, it's like, they can't even speak right. I'm like, this person speaks multiple languages. You speak one very poorly. Like,
yeah. And you also understood what they said, right? So therefore,
they're clearly getting through to you.
Exactly.
Anyway, all right. So here's the last two questions for you. As a writer, and specifically the type of writer that you are, where you're pulling all these deep memories, you're opening yourself up, right? Can you give me maybe a little mundane memory? Ideally, if it's a happy memory, but I guess it doesn't have to be, that just pops in your head periodically. Could be as simple as someone smiling at you one day and like the sun was out or something that you haven't written about or talk about often because it's just so plain and like basic.
You know what's interesting? Last night I was thinking about I haven't had a chance to write about any of my pets, like any, the cats that have been a part of my life. And with these two dogs, there's like new experiences that I think I'm having with them, and it feels like through them as well as they like approach the world. And so I feel like I may in the past have been the kind of person who's just like, why would you write about this animal when there's people that you should be writing about?
Yeah.
And now I'm like, wait, this is all part of our human experience. Like, it is part of my human experience to interact with animals,
Couldn't agree
more. Because we're also forms of animals.
Right.
So I think that one thing I would like to do more of is pay more attention to how these animals are navigating the spaces here, and maybe I could write something about that.
I love that because sometimes I think about how it's really important, I think, to be authentic when it comes to creating art. And if activism or like these big important things don't come naturally to you on the page, sometimes it's better just do what comes natural to you. But as a person, you can be into all of that. You don't have to
Exactly.
constantly show people unless it feels very organic to you, and or maybe you want to work on that. That's fine too. But for me, I'm like, I don't think you should feel a pressure to show your activism through art if it doesn't come naturally. It's more important to be there in the world for people. And you know what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like if you become this sort of niche like poet who writes about robots, machines all the time, like
Hmm.
if you do that well, like do it.
Right.
Like that's
Yeah.
the point. If you become this like the canine poet, you know, the canine poet laureate, or the poet who writes so much about like clowns, like
Mhm.
so be it.
Yeah.
Just know that that there are ways to be amazing, even if you're writing about, you know, like
Mm.
clowns or
Right. And you could also be providing, not to go too deep into this, but you could also be providing a little break for people who are very
sure.
like for them. So I don't know.
Yep.
I just feel like I just don't want people to feel that because I've talked this to certain people who are like, I just feel this pressure because I'm not like activist enough in my art. And I just want to be like,
Sure.
just do your thing and just be a good person. Like it's gonna be
Yeah.
okay.
And I also think too that if you keep working on yourself, meaning that if you if you find opportunities as a person to invest yourself in community organizing
Mhm.
or doing, you know, service in the community, or you know, all kinds of things, that's eventually going to like show in your art, you know, because again, is if you're authentically writing about your life,
Mm.
you you can't help but to write about those things too.
Right.
I feel like it's yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I again talking over you, so I get
No,
too excited
I
sometimes.
just feel like you can't force to, you know, there are poems obviously that are very much fictional, right?
Mm.
That people write about fictional experiences, fictional characters, and whatnot, and that's still okay, you know. But I do think that recently I don't know why, but I fucking love Liza Minnelli,
Mm.
and she was doing this interview with Larry King, and I was watching it recently, like while working out, and my friend was like, "Wait, you do that? Like you actually watch like interviews while working out?" I was like, "Well, this is gonna be it. Like I'm definitely gonna start doing this."
Yeah.
And so, what was interesting about watching this is she was constantly, you know, there were different callers from across the country, like calling in and praising her as like this amazing entertainer. And one of the things that she continuously like kept coming back to is that if she made someone smile, you know, for 4 minutes,
Hmm.
that was enough. And I think we often like have this this is of course, I blame capitalism for this, that every single moment needs to be poignant, that every single moment needs to be urgent, that every single moment needs to be, you know, capital M moment.
Hmm.
And you can't live like that, you know. If you did, you would like I don't think anyone is capable of doing that. You would just like, I feel like your who you are as a person is just gonna split in so many different directions because you would never be authentic to yourself. Being
Right.
authentic to an experience is very different than being authentic to yourself. Like
Totally agree.
yeah, you'll be like the poet who's constantly writing about all these experiences, and yet like what time do you have to actually reflect on yourself, you know, why you went through that experience. So
Yeah, and as corny as it sounds, and I get how some people can run with this in the wrong direction, but a form of making the world a better place can be as simple as, oh, I write funny things that don't really need like
exactly.
like forget about art for a second. Like just I have had so many experiences where I will even just go to a restaurant, and if it's a really good meal, I'll be like, "Can I please speak to the chef?" I'll go in the back, and a lot of the times, if it's not super busy, I'll do it, obviously. But
Yeah,
the
yeah,
chef
yeah.
will come out and they'll be like looking like, "Oh, this person's gonna complain," and I just be like, "That was fucking beautiful what you just did on my
Yeah.
plate." And you would be now. I mean, I'm not the most popular person ever, but a lot of these restaurant owners that I live by, they know me. They're like, oh, Michael, hey, they'll give me, not to do this for free stuff, but like, your kindness can, if like, don't hold back kindness. It can bleed through to the world and actually make a difference. Anyway, I don't want to go on and on about this. Last question. If I handed you $5,000 right now and you had to spend it on yourself and today, what might you buy?
Oh my Lord. Tons of desserts.
Because you're allowed to, right? You chose that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of desserts. What else would I buy? So it's probably going to sound really corny, but as a way to just kind of keep ourselves cheery while we're indoors, during this pandemic. My partner is very much into like Christmas things, and this is something that I've had a very complicated relationship to Christmas, because Christmas to me is so tied to commercialization and like, when you're poor, like most likely you won't have these lavish Christmases. And so recently I've been thinking about my grandfather. So my grandfather died from COVID. This was in June.
Hey.
And I was thinking about a way to honor him. And one of the things that he used to love was he used to love these like really intricate like nativity scenes like under the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how can I honor him in a way that feels like partly me and then also partly him? Like, I'm not going to have something incredibly like complex anywhere in my house because I feel like the dogs are just gonna like tear through it.
Yeah.
So how can I have something that has that spirit of nativity? So since you were asking like what can I buy, I'm actually thinking about like I should probably buy like a set. And there's one that I already found that is just beautiful. It's carved so beautifully, and it feels very odd for me because I haven't thought about like a nativity scene in ages.
Right.
So yeah,
the world is complex like that. Like something that you normally in a different situation, but like I don't give a shit about that. Now you have with. I'm so glad I asked you that because that was I love that story. I hope you get that.
Thank you.
But look, thank you so much for all the time I took out up from you. I wasn't expecting it to go this long, so I really appreciate it. And I hope you had somewhat of a good time doing this.
Of course. Thank you so much, Michael. I mean, I'm thinking about all the smiling I've done. Like I burned some calories, right? So
do you want people to find you online from this? If you do,
sure.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
People,
people can find me. My website is royguzman.com. You can also, if you're interested in following my Twitter shenanigans, it's Catrachos. So it's like the title of my book, but instead of the O, there's an X. I'm also on Instagram, though I don't check it as much. I'm thinking that if I can do a ton of grading and get grading done by this week, I'm probably going to start taking pictures of like nature because I feel like, I need to do that at some point, just be out and about. But yeah, people can find me there. And, my book, the Graywolf has a webpage for it. So if you're interested in reading my book, I would love it.
Very cool. And I'm fully expecting if you do get this nativity scene set or whatever it may be, you're going to post it to Instagram.
Absolutely.
Okay,
I'm getting a ton of ideas.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.